"You're not my real daughter." My father said it calmly, standing in the middle of a crowded room, his voice steady as if he were stating a simple fact. Not an insult, not a weapon, just the truth, his truth. For a second, everything froze. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Dozens of eyes turned toward me at once, heavy with shock, pity, and curiosity. I could feel my face burning, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. This was the moment I was supposed to break, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled. I picked up my glass, slowly, deliberately, and met my parents' eyes across the room. Because while they thought they were exposing me, they had no idea what they had just done. For years, I had kept a secret that held their entire life together. And with just 3 words, I was about to reveal exactly who had been paying all their bills. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for as long as I can remember, I was the daughter who learned not to ask for too much. In our house, there were no written rules. No one ever sat me down and explained where I stood. But I understood it anyway through tone, through silence, through the way conversations shifted when I entered the room. My father, Robert Mitchell, was a man who believed respect was something you commanded, not earned. He liked control. He liked being seen as the provider, the decision-maker, the man everyone relied on. Growing up, I watched him carefully. I learned when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. My mother, Linda, was different. Her power didn't come from her voice, but from her image. She cared deeply about how our family appeared to others, neighbors, co-workers, distant relatives. If something looked good from the outside, then, in her mind, it was good. And then there was my younger sister, Hannah. Hannah was everything people noticed. She had a laugh that filled rooms, and a smile that made teachers forgive late homework and strangers strike up conversations. She didn't have to try. Life opened doors for her without asking for effort in return. I loved her. I truly did. But loving her didn't stop me from noticing the difference. When Hannah cried, the house rearranged itself around her emotions. When I struggled, I learned how to carry it quietly. When she needed reassurance, she received speeches about her potential. When I succeeded, it was expected, almost assumed. "You've always been strong, Sarah," my mother would say whenever I hinted that something hurt. "You don't need the same kind of attention." At first, I took that as a compliment. Strength sounded like something to be proud of. Over time, I realized it was just another way of saying you're easier to ignore. After I graduated college, my parents took me out to dinner. Nothing fancy. A small restaurant near their house. 5 of us at the table. My father asked about my job prospects. My mother commented on how tired I looked. The bill came, my father paid it, and that was it. No speeches. No celebration. "You'll be fine," my father said as we stood up to leave. "You've always known how to take care of yourself." 2 months later, Hannah got her acceptance letter. They rented out an entire restaurant. There were balloons tied to the chairs, a 3-tier cake with her name written in gold icing, and relatives I hadn't seen in years. My father stood at the center of the room, glass raised high, talking about dreams, opportunity, and how proud he was of his youngest daughter. I clapped. I smiled. I meant it. But something inside me quietly folded in on itself. Later that night, when I asked my mother why the celebrations had been so different, she didn't hesitate. "Hannah needs encouragement," she said, as if explaining something obvious. "She's sensitive. You're not." I didn't argue. I never argued. That became my role in the family, the daughter who didn't need much, the one who adapted, the one who made things easier by not asking questions, by not expecting fairness, by not demanding space. After graduation, I moved into a small apartment and started working full-time. Entry-level position, long hours, tight budget. I learned how to stretch a paycheck, how to say no to myself before anyone else had to. My parents rarely checked in. When they did, it was quick. "You working too much again?" My mother would say lightly. "You're always so busy." Busy became their explanation for everything. Why I wasn't invited to certain gatherings, why I found out about family news late, why my absence never seemed to be noticed until someone needed something practical. I told myself this was normal, that adulthood simply looked like this, that love didn't need constant proof. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that in my parents' minds, I had already been quietly reassigned. Not the daughter who belonged. Not the daughter who was celebrated. just the daughter who could be relied on. And when the moment came when my father finally called me late one night, his voice stripped of authority and pride, I didn't hesitate. Because by then, being needed felt dangerously close to being loved. And I was still desperate enough to believe they were the same thing. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. I remembered the time because I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before answering. My father never called that late, ever. Not when I was sick, not when I moved out, not even when my grandmother passed away. Seeing Robert Mitchell's name glowing on my phone made my stomach tighten. "Dad?" I answered. For a moment, there was only breathing on the other end. Slow, uneven, as if he were deciding whether to speak at all. "Sarah," he finally said. His voice sounded smaller, stripped of the confidence I had grown up with. "I need to talk to you. But you can't tell anyone, especially not your mother, and not Hannah." That alone was enough to make my heart race. My father was not a man who asked for secrecy. He demanded it. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting up in bed. Another pause. Then, quietly, "I lost my job." The words landed heavier than I expected. He explained it in pieces, as if saying everything at once might make it too real. Corporate restructuring, downsizing, nothing personal. 22 years at the same company, gone in a single meeting. "I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed," he said. "I didn't want your mother to worry." I pictured my father the way I'd always known him, neatly dressed, voice firm, certain of his place in the world. Hearing him like this felt disorienting. "There's more," he added. Of course there was. A few years earlier, he'd moved a large portion of their savings into what a friend had called a safe investment. It wasn't safe. The money didn't disappear overnight, but it bled out slowly, quietly, until there was almost nothing left. "We're behind on the mortgage," he admitted. "If we miss another payment—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I felt something shift inside me. Fear, yes, but also something else. Responsibility. The kind that settles in your chest and refuses to leave. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. The relief in his voice was immediate, almost painful to hear. "I just need a little help," he said quickly. "Just until I find something else. It won't be long." The next day, my mother called. Her voice was thick, emotional, carefully controlled. "Your father told me he spoke to you," she said. "We hate to ask this of you, Sarah, truly, but you're the only one we can rely on right now." That word again. Rely on. "Hannah is still in school," my mother continued. "She needs to focus. She can't be distracted by adult problems." Of course, she couldn't. "We'll pay you back," my mother added quickly, "as soon as things stabilize." Then her tone dropped, turning serious. "But no one can know about this. Not your sister, not the family. People don't need to think we're struggling." I understood exactly what she meant. Their reputation mattered more than the truth. I was making a modest salary at the time. Enough to survive, not enough to feel secure. After rent, student loans, and basic expenses, there wasn't much left. When my father finally said the number $2,500 a month, I felt my breath catch. That was more than half of what I had left after expenses. I hesitated, just for a second. "Sarah," my mother said softly, sensing it. "You've always been such a good daughter." There it was. Not love, not gratitude. Approval, conditional and fragile. "I'll do it," I said. My mother exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. "We'll never forget this," she promised. Never. I set up the automatic transfer that same week. Every month, without fail, the money left my account and entered theirs. Quietly. Efficiently. No reminders needed. At first, I told myself it was temporary. 3 months, maybe 6. I picked up extra shifts. Cut back on groceries. Canceled my gym membership. I stopped going out with friends as often, stopped buying clothes unless I absolutely needed them. When my father called to say the first mortgage payment had gone through, he sounded lighter, almost normal. "You saved us," he said. Those words stayed with me longer than they should have, because being needed felt good. It felt like proof that I mattered, that I had a place in this family after all. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't see yet, was that this wasn't a lifeline. It was a leash. And once I put it on, no one had any intention of taking it off. At first, it really did feel temporary. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into a year. Every time I thought we were nearing the end, something else unexpected happened. Another delay, another setback, another quiet request that sounded more like an assumption than a question. The automatic transfer became part of my life, the way breathing does, so constant I barely noticed it anymore. The money left my account on the same day each month, like clockwork. I planned my life around what remained, and slowly, without anyone ever saying it out loud, helping out became expected. I worked harder, longer hours, weekend projects. I chased promotions not because I wanted status, but because every raise meant I could keep up. Junior analyst became senior. Senior became manager. Each new title came with congratulations at work and a silent adjustment at home. "Could you send a little more this month?" my father would ask casually, just until things stabilize. They never did. When I moved into my apartment, I bought secondhand furniture and told myself I preferred it that way. When friends talked about vacations, I smiled and said I was saving for something important. I skipped weddings, baby showers, weekend trips. I learned how to say no without explaining. No one ever noticed what I gave up, but everyone noticed Hannah. Hannah graduated college with honors. My parents threw another party bigger this time. She got a brand new car as a graduation gift. When she moved to the city for her first job, my parents paid the deposit on her apartment. "She needs a good start," my mother explained. "First impressions matter." I stared at my phone when she said it, my bank app still open from checking my balance. I commuted nearly 2 hours each way on public transportation. When my laptop broke, I replaced it with a refurbished model and hoped it would last. When my friends upgraded their phones, I kept mine until the screen cracked so badly I could barely read texts. Hannah never worried about those things. Her birthdays became events, catered dinners, carefully wrapped gifts, laughter echoing through my parents' house. Mine passed quietly, sometimes a card, sometimes a quick call. "You know, we're proud of you," my mother would say if I sounded distant. "You don't need all the fuss." I told myself that was fine. I told myself I didn't want the fuss. But the truth was harder to ignore as the years went by. I wasn't just helping my parents survive. I was funding a life they pretended they could afford on their own. Every time someone complimented them on how well they were doing, how impressive it was that they had planned so well for retirement, my stomach twisted. They smiled. They nodded. They accepted the praise. They never corrected anyone, and they never acknowledged me. Not once did they say thank you in front of anyone else. Not once did they say my name when people asked how they managed so comfortably. It was as if the money appeared out of thin air, clean, effortless, untraceable. I was invisible again. Only this time I was invisible with purpose. The math haunted me. 10 years. 120 months. An average of nearly $3,000 a month by the end. When I finally added it up one night, sitting alone at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cold cup of coffee, the number made my chest tighten. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. My 20s. My future. I paid for their peace while quietly postponing my own life. The realization didn't come all at once. It crept in during small moments. The night my boyfriend asked why I never talked about buying a place of my own. The time a coworker joked that I lived like someone just starting out, even though my salary said otherwise. The morning I checked my savings and realized how little was actually mine. I told myself it would end soon. I told myself it had to. Then Hannah got engaged. My mother called me breathless with excitement, listing venues and guest counts like she was reading from a catalog. "We're thinking something elegant," she said. "Classic. No expense spared." I hesitated. "How are you paying for all this?" I asked carefully. There was a pause on the line, not long but deliberate. "That's not something you need to worry about," my father said, his voice suddenly firm again. Familiar, dismissive. And in that moment, something inside me finally cracked, because I knew the answer. And for the first time in 10 years, I allowed myself to ask a question I'd been avoiding since that night at 11:47 p.m. What happens if I stop? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew this much: whatever came next was going to change everything. Hannah's engagement changed the atmosphere in our family overnight. Suddenly, every conversation revolved around flowers, venues, guest lists, and colors. My mother spoke faster, brighter, as if planning the wedding gave her renewed purpose. My father walked with a familiar confidence again, his shoulders squared, his voice firm, almost proud. It was like watching them step back into a version of themselves I thought had disappeared. The reception should feel timeless, my mother said during one of her many calls. Nothing cheap, nothing rushed. I listened quietly, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the wall of my apartment. How many guests? I asked. Oh, at least 200, she replied without hesitation. Maybe more. Hannah deserves a celebration people will remember. The word deserves echoed in my head. They talked about the venue first, a country club just outside the city. Elegant, exclusive, expensive. Then the dress. Imported flowers, a live orchestra, every detail carefully chosen to signal success. And then my mother said it. Your father and I will pay for everything. I closed my eyes. For a long moment, I said nothing. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, waiting for approval, for admiration. How? I asked finally. I kept my tone neutral. Careful. How are you paying for all of this? The silence was immediate. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't confused. It was defensive. That's not your concern, Sarah, my father said sharply, cutting into the call. We've planned for this. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Planned with what money? I asked. My mother let out a short, humorless laugh. Why are you being difficult? I'm not, I said. I'm asking a simple question. You always do this, my father snapped. You make things uncomfortable when they don't need to be. I almost apologized. The instinct was still there, automatic and familiar. Years of conditioning told me to back down, to smooth things over, to accept the answer I was given. But this time, I didn't. You told everyone you were financially stable, I said slowly. You told everyone you were comfortable. You told everyone you didn't need help. And we don't, my mother replied, her voice tight. I took a breath. Then why have I been sending you money every single month for nearly 10 years? The line went dead silent. When my father spoke again, his voice had changed. That money, he said coldly, was your responsibility. I felt like the floor had shifted beneath me. My responsibility? I repeated. We raised you, he continued. We gave you everything. That's what children do. They help their parents. It was supposed to be temporary, I said. You said that, and you agreed, he shot back. No one forced you. That was the moment something inside me finally broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly, like a rope snapping under too much tension. I ended the call without another word. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I felt strangely calm. I logged into my bank account and scrolled. Transaction after transaction. Month after month. Year after year. The numbers blurred together at first, then sharpened as I forced myself to keep going. I opened old emails, transfer confirmations, notifications I had long stopped reading. I created a spreadsheet. Dates. Amounts. Notes. By the time I finished, it was nearly 3 in the morning. The totals stared back at me from the bottom of the screen. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands shaking. This wasn't generosity anymore. It was exploitation. The next morning, I called Mark Reynolds, my parents' financial advisor. He had worked with my family for years. Professional, discreet, careful with his words. Sarah, he said when he recognized my voice. I was wondering when you'd reach out. It is an Antares styes. I need to know something, I said. And I need the truth. There was a pause. I can't disclose everything without your parents' permission, he said carefully. I've been the primary contributor to their accounts for almost a decade, I replied. I think that gives me the right to ask. Another pause, longer this time. You're not wrong, he admitted. He confirmed what I already knew but hadn't wanted to hear. The current balance. The recent withdrawals. The fact that large sums had already been pulled for wedding-related expenses. They're spending your money, he said quietly. And they're doing it as if it belongs to them. I swallowed hard. Do I have any legal obligation to continue? I asked. No, he answered without hesitation. None. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. For years I had told myself I was helping, that I was doing the right thing, that this was what loyalty looked like. But loyalty, I was beginning to understand, was not supposed to erase you. That evening, I received another call from my mother. "We need to talk," she said. "You were very disrespectful yesterday." I almost laughed. "Instead," I said calmly, "I think it's time we stop pretending." She inhaled sharply, as if preparing for an argument. I didn't give her the chance. "I'll be at the rehearsal dinner," I said. "We'll talk then." After I hung up, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Hannah. "Is everything okay? Mom sounds upset." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "We'll talk soon." I didn't know exactly how it would happen. I didn't have a speech planned. I wasn't looking for revenge. But for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. And I had a feeling that when it finally came out publicly, unmistakably, it would change far more than just one family dinner. The rehearsal dinner was held at Riverside Hall, one of those places designed to make wealth feel effortless. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over white tablecloths and polished silverware. Soft music floated through the room. Waiters moved smoothly between tables, offering champagne with practiced smiles. It was beautiful, and it was expensive. 200 guests filled the room, family, friends, colleagues, distant relatives, people who had watched my parents build their carefully curated image for decades. Everyone looked comfortable, confident, certain. Daniel squeezed my hand as we walked in. "You okay?" he whispered. "Ask me after tonight," I replied. I had chosen my outfit carefully. Nothing flashy, nothing that competed with Hannah. A simple navy dress, elegant and understated. I wasn't here to be noticed. I was here to survive what I already knew was coming. Across the room, I saw my parents. My father stood tall, glass in hand, laughing easily. My mother looked radiant, her smile practiced and perfect. To anyone watching, they were exactly what they wanted to be: successful, generous, proud parents hosting a flawless celebration. Hannah rushed over when she saw me, glowing with excitement. "I'm so glad you came," she said, hugging me tightly. "Mom wasn't sure you would." "I wouldn't miss it," I said truthfully. She smiled and hurried off to greet more guests, leaving me standing there with a familiar ache in my chest. Even now, even tonight, I was an afterthought. The evening unfolded slowly. Conversations, toasts, laughter, compliments. People stopped my parents to congratulate them. "You must be so proud," someone said. "You did an incredible job raising her," another added. "And paying for all of this, what a gift," a third laughed. My parents accepted every word without hesitation. Then my father tapped his glass. The sound cut cleanly through the room. "May I have everyone's attention?" The music faded. Conversations stopped. All eyes turned toward the head table. My father smiled. That familiar, confident smile I had grown up with, the one that made people listen. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. "This is a very special moment for our family." My mother stepped closer to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "For years," my father continued, "we've worked hard to build a life we're proud of. A life centered on family." Polite applause followed. "Hannah," he said, turning toward my sister, "you have brought us nothing but joy. Watching you grow into the woman you are today has been the greatest privilege of our lives." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. The room softened around her. "And as parents," my mother added, her voice warm and emotional, "there is nothing more important than giving our daughter the life she deserves." She paused. Her gaze shifted. It landed on me. "We're happy to be paying for this entire wedding," she said clearly, her smile tightening just enough for me to notice. "Because our real daughter deserves nothing less." The room fell silent. Not awkward silence. Not polite silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you feel dizzy. Every head turned toward me. I felt it instantly, the weight of curiosity, confusion, judgment. Whispers began almost immediately, low and sharp. What did she mean by that? That's her older daughter, isn't it? Why would she say something like that? My hands were shaking beneath the table. Daniel leaned close. "We can leave. Right now." I looked at my parents. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother held her smile, steady and satisfied, as if she had just made a necessary correction. And, in that moment, I understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. They wanted me humiliated, reduced, put back in my place publicly, permanently. For a brief second, the old instinct surged up inside me. "Don't cause a scene." Swallow it. Protect the family. Then I thought about 10 years of silence. 10 years of transfers. 10 years of being erased while funding the very life they were so proud to display. And something inside me finally settled. I stood up. The movement was small, but it was enough. The whispers stopped. My mother's smile faltered. I'd like to add something, I said calmly, lifting my glass. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Thank you, Mom, I continued. That was memorable. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. I especially appreciate being reminded that I'm not your real daughter in front of all these guests. My mother's face stiffened. But since we're being honest tonight, I said, I think there's one detail everyone deserves to understand. Have reminders in sitting mains to be in the stens. And it was not mains. I turned slightly toward the bar, where Mark Reynolds stood, his expression unreadable. Mr. Reynolds, I said, you've been our family's financial advisor for many years, correct? My father's head snapped up. Sarah, this is not the time. It's exactly the time, I replied, my tone steady. I looked back at Mark. Could you tell everyone here who has been paying my parents' household bills for the past several years? The room was so quiet I could hear someone inhale sharply. Mark hesitated. Just for a moment. Then he straightened. I believe the truth matters, he said carefully. For nearly a decade, the primary financial support for Robert and Linda Mitchell has come from their eldest daughter, Sarah. A collective gasp swept through the room. My mother's face drained of color. Mark continued, his voice calm but firm. Over that time, Sarah has contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars in recurring payments covering household expenses, loans, and ongoing costs. That's private, my father shouted. You made it public, I said softly. I met my mother's eyes. You told everyone you paid for this wedding yourselves. I'm just explaining where that money actually came from. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. This is outrageous, my father said. You're doing this for attention. I smiled then. Not kindly. No, I said. I'm doing this for clarity. I raised my glass. There are 3 words I've been meaning to say for a long time. The room held its breath. I'm stopping payments. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Effective immediately, I added. No more automatic transfers. No more quiet support. If you want to pay for everything now, you actually can. The sound of breaking glass followed. My father's champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. The illusion shattered with it. I set my glass down. I'm done paying to be invisible. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't make it more than 10 steps before my mother's voice cut through the room. Sarah. It wasn't the sharp, controlled tone she used in public. This time it was thin, frantic, almost pleading. I stopped but didn't turn around. You didn't have to do this, she said. You've embarrassed us. I let out a slow breath and finally faced her. No, I said quietly. I told the truth. You embarrassed yourselves. My father pushed past her, his face flushed, his jaw tight with rage. You think you've won something tonight? He hissed. You've made yourself look cruel, petty. Around us, the room buzzed with whispered conversations. People were no longer pretending not to stare. Phones were already out. The story was spreading in real time. I didn't come here to win, I said. I came here to stop losing. My mother reached for my arm. I stepped back. You can't just walk away from your family, she said, her voice cracking. After everything we've done for you. I almost laughed. Everything you've done? I asked softly. Or everything you let me do for you? She flinched. Hannah stood a few feet away, frozen, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her fiancé's arm. Sarah, she whispered. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. And next in the stations. I know, I said gently, and I meant it. She had been raised inside the bubble they created, favored, protected, blind to what held it all together. My father scoffed. She's exaggerating, he said loudly, clearly for the benefit of the guests nearby. Families help each other. That's all this was. That's not how help works, a voice said from behind us. I turned to see Aunt Claire, my mother's older sister, standing with her arms crossed. She had watched the entire exchange in silence until now. You don't take someone's money for 10 years, she continued, and then pretend it was nothing. My mother's face crumpled. This isn't your business, she snapped. It became my business when you humiliated your own daughter in public, Aunt Claire replied calmly. The tension in the room thickened. Guests pretended to sip drinks while leaning closer, eager not to miss a word. My father straightened his jacket, trying to reclaim control. We'll discuss this privately, he announced. As a family. No, I said. The word landed with more weight than I expected. No more private conversations, I continued. No more closed doors. No more rewriting what happened to make yourselves comfortable. My father stared at me, disbelief flashing across his face. You really think you can just cut us off? He said. You owe us. I don't owe you my future, I replied. My mother started crying, then real tears this time, streaking her carefully applied makeup. You're tearing this family apart, she sobbed. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not guilt, grief. This family started tearing itself apart a long time ago, I said quietly. I just stopped holding it together. Daniel appeared at my side, placing a steady hand on my back. We're leaving, he said firmly. As we turned toward the exit, my father's voice followed us, sharp and desperate. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. I paused. For a moment, I considered all the times I had stayed silent to avoid hearing those exact words. Then I looked at him. I've been gone for years, I said. You just didn't notice. We stepped outside into the cool night air. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally crashing. Daniel wrapped his arms around me. You did the right thing, he said. I know, I whispered. So why does it hurt so much? Because boundaries hurt, I realized. Especially when they come decades too late. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. My mother's name filled the screen, over and over again. Please call us. We need to talk. You didn't have to do this. You've gone too far. Then, one from my father. You've made a terrible mistake. I turned the phone off. The next morning, the fallout spread faster than I could have imagined. By noon, I had messages from relatives I barely spoke to. Some were confused, some were angry, some quietly apologetic. I always wondered, one cousin wrote. I just didn't think it was that bad. A text came from Mark Reynolds. Automatic transfers terminated as requested. Confirmation attached. I stared at the screen for a long time. It was really over. That afternoon, Hannah called. Her voice was small. Careful. Mom and Dad are saying the wedding budget changed, she said. They're cutting things back. A lot. I know, I replied. Brad's parents offered to help, she added quickly. They were surprised. Not impressed. There was a pause. Do you hate me? She asked. The question hit harder than anything my parents had said. No, I answered honestly. I don't hate you. I just can't pretend everything was fair anymore. She sniffed. I wish I'd known. So do I said. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by a silence that felt different than before. Not empty, just unfamiliar. For the first time in 10 years, my paycheck was mine. No automatic transfers. No quiet sacrifices. No invisible obligations. And as terrifying as that freedom felt, it was also the first thing that had belonged entirely to me in a very long time. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful at first. It was unsettling. For nearly a decade, my life had been structured around obligation numbers, transfers, silent expectations. When that disappeared, it left behind a strange emptiness, like stepping off a moving train and realizing your legs don't quite know how to stand still. The first thing I did was open a new savings account. It sounds small, almost laughable considering everything that had happened. But watching my paycheck sit there untouched, unclaimed by anyone else felt unreal. For the first time in years, my money stayed with me. I started tracking my expenses, not out of fear this time, but out of intention. I paid off lingering debts. I set up retirement contributions ones with my name on them. Each small step felt like reclaiming a piece of a future I had quietly postponed. At work, something unexpected happened. Without the constant pressure of needing to earn more just to give it away, I finally breathed. I focused. I spoke up in meetings instead of shrinking back. When a leadership role opened, I applied without telling myself I wasn't ready. I got it. The congratulations felt different this time. Cleaner. Earned. Daniel took me out to dinner that night, not a celebration for surviving something painful, but for becoming something stronger. "I'm proud of you," he said, reaching across the table. Not for what I'd sacrificed, but for what I'd chosen. A few weeks later, I started therapy. I told myself I didn't need it, that I was fine, that I'd already handled the worst part. I was wrong. Unpacking years of being the easy one wasn't quick or comfortable. My therapist listened quietly as I described my family, the money, the silence. "You learned something very early," she said one afternoon. "That being useful was safer than being vulnerable." She explained something called a fawn response. How, when rejection feels possible, some people try to prevent it by giving, fixing, pleasing. "You weren't buying love," she said gently. "You were trying to earn your place." The words stayed with me. They explained so much of what I had never been able to name. My parents continued to reach out, sometimes apologetic, sometimes accusatory. My mother's messages swung wildly between regret and resentment. "I don't recognize you anymore," she wrote once. "You've changed." She was right. I had. Our relationship settled into something distant but civil. Phone calls on holidays, polite conversations, boundaries that no longer felt negotiable. They sold the house a few months later, downsized, adjusted. For the first time, they were living within their means. Hannah and I spoke more often. At first, the conversations were awkward. Careful. She carried guilt she didn't know what to do with. I carried years of resentment I didn't want to turn into blame. One evening, she came over with an envelope in her hands. "I read everything," she said quietly. "The numbers, the timeline." She looked up at me, eyes red. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have asked questions. I should have noticed." "You didn't create this," I told her. "But now you get to decide what kind of sister you want to be." She nodded slowly. That night, we talked like adults for the first time in our lives. Not as roles assigned by our parents, but as two women trying to understand where we stood. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Daniel and I started looking at apartments together. Nothing extravagant. Something real. Somewhere that felt like ours. When we finally moved in, we celebrated with takeout and cheap wine, sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes. "Any regrets?" he asked. I thought about it carefully. "Only that I waited so long," I said. The truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had done its job, it got me out. What replaced it was clarity. I finally understood that love doesn't demand self-erasure, that family doesn't require silence, that generosity without boundaries isn't kindness, it's slow abandonment of yourself. I stopped waiting for my parents to see me. I started seeing myself. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. For a long time, I thought the hardest part of my story was standing up at that dinner and speaking the truth. I was wrong. The hardest part came afterward, learning how to live without the hope that someday, someone else would finally tell me I was enough. When the noise settled, when the messages slowed, when the drama faded into memory, I was left with a quieter question: who am I when I'm no longer needed? For years, my worth had been measured by what I provided: money, stability, silence. I had confused usefulness with love, obligation with belonging. Letting go of that identity felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory without a map. But slowly, something else took its place. I learned that boundaries are not punishments. They are protections. I learned that saying no doesn't make you cruel, it makes you honest. And I learned that the law exists for a reason: to protect people from being quietly exploited under the name of family duty. Ending those transfers wasn't abandonment. It was exercising a right I had always had, but never believed I was allowed to use. My parents and I never had a dramatic reconciliation. There was no tearful apology that fixed everything. No sudden realization that turned them into different people. And that was okay. Healing didn't come from their understanding. It came from my acceptance that I didn't need it anymore. We speak occasionally now, carefully, respectfully, with limits that are clear and non-negotiable. They know what I will and will not do. And more importantly, so do I. Hannah's wedding went on smaller, quieter, more honest than originally planned. I attended, not as a financier or a prop, but as a sister. When she looked at me during the ceremony, there was something new in her eyes: recognition. Afterward, she hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for telling the truth." That meant more to me than she probably realized. Daniel and I built a life that feels solid, not because it looks impressive, but because it's ours. A shared space, shared goals, shared responsibility, freely chosen, never demanded. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the version of myself who answered that phone call at 11:47 p.m., all those years ago. The one who said yes without asking what it would cost her. I don't judge her. She did the best she could with what she knew. But I'm grateful I didn't stay her forever. If there's one thing I want anyone hearing my story to understand, it's this. You don't have to burn yourself down to keep other people warm. Love that requires your silence isn't love. Support that demands your self-erasure isn't loyalty. And family that only values you when you're giving isn't entitled to keep taking. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to survive. I didn't stop paying their bills out of anger. I stopped because I finally realized that my life deserved investment too. And the moment I believed that, truly believed it, everything changed. I'm not invisible anymore. Not because someone finally saw me, but because I stopped disappearing. And that, more than anything else, is the ending I needed.